There's something profound about turning 40. It's the age when society whispers slow down, but your soul shouts not yet. It's the point where expectations often outweigh your own ambitions. And yet in the quiet corners of the world, there's a rare group of women, only 5%, who do something remarkable. They rise. Not because it's easy, but because they've decided to finally become who they were always meant to be. They reclaim their identity, not in a loud, rebellious way, but in a steady, resolute whisper that builds into a roar. That whisper is the first honest conversation they've had with themselves in years. It's the moment a woman, perhaps at her kitchen table late at night or walking quietly through her neighborhood at dawn, asks, "Who am I really? Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as a loyal employee or the dependable friend, but as..." That question doesn't arise out of dissatisfaction with others. It rises from the quiet realization that she's been a supporting character in her own life for far too long. Because for most women, especially past 40, life becomes a series of roles: daughter, partner, mother, manager, provider, nurturer. And these roles, while noble and vital, can become so heavy that they begin to smother the self beneath them. Day after day, year after year, she performs, shows up, gives, sacrifices, and rarely asks what she wants. Not because she doesn't care, but because she's been conditioned to believe that asking for more is selfish, that desiring something for herself somehow detracts from her worthiness or value. But then something shifts. Sometimes it's a quiet sadness that lingers even when life looks perfect on the outside. Sometimes it's a moment of clarity, a comment from a child, a glance in the mirror, a birthday that feels heavier than expected. And sometimes, like in Lisa's case, it's standing in a corner office, looking out over a city she helped build and realizing that none of it feels like hers. That all of it, somehow, was built on someone else's blueprint of success. That moment is terrifying. But it is also liberating, because that's when the 5% woman is born. She is not defined by the title she held or the salary she earned. She is not less because she stepped away from a role. In fact, she is more aware, more intentional, more aligned. Lisa didn't walk away from her executive job because she failed. She walked away because she finally succeeded in seeing herself. She understood that living according to others' expectations is a slow erosion of the soul. And no paycheck, no accolade, no applause is worth that. Reclaiming your identity doesn't mean walking away from your life. It means walking back to yourself. It means recognizing that somewhere along the line you stopped asking yourself what made you feel alive. You started saying yes to things that made you smaller, quieter, more convenient. You wore clothes you didn't love, smiled when you didn't mean it, stayed in rooms that drained you. Not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough to hold space for everyone else. But now it's your turn. There is immense power in choosing to honor yourself, in saying I matter too, not instead of others, not in competition but in truth, that your desires, your dreams, your voice are valid, even if no one else understands them at first. Because reclaiming your identity is not about permission from others, it's about permission from yourself. And here's the emotional truth that no one talks about: it's hard, it's messy. You will question yourself. People around you may not understand. You might lose friends who liked the version of you that was easier to manage, less demanding. You might even miss the comfort of invisibility sometimes, because standing in your truth can feel unbearably vulnerable. But I promise you, what's on the other side of that vulnerability is a kind of strength you've never known. You'll start to notice things different. Music will sound different, food will taste richer, conversations will deepen, and suddenly things you used to tolerate will feel unbearable. Not because they changed, but because you did. That's the sign of reclamation. That's the sign of awakening. When your soul starts rejecting what no longer aligns, you will also start attracting different energy. Not because you tried to change others, but because you changed your relationship with yourself. You stopped apologizing for taking up space. You stopped minimizing your voice to keep the peace. You stopped defining your worth by how useful you were to others. That shift radiates, and it draws others who are on the same path. Women who are also waking up, also remembering, also rising. This isn't a midlife crisis. This is a midlife clarity. It's when the fog lifts, and you finally see yourself, not as broken or unfinished, but as whole and worthy. It's when you stop chasing youth and start embodying wisdom. When you stop counting the years and start living the day. And in that space, you create a new legacy. Not one defined by sacrifice alone, but by authenticity, by joy, by fire. It's not about being selfish, it's about being self-full. Imagine what changes in the world when more women become full versions of themselves. When mothers model wholeness to their daughters. When partners speak with clarity and compassion because they know who they are. When communities are built not just on service, but on sovereignty. That ripple effect is profound. It starts with one woman, one decision, one moment of honesty. This is not a call to abandon what you've built. It's a call to remember who you were before the world told you who to be, to dust off the dreams you shelved for later, to open the journal you forgot you kept, to dance in your living room just because the music moves you, to say no when it drains you and yes when it ignites you. Reclaiming your identity is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Because the world doesn't need more women pretending to be fine. The world needs more women who are free, who are alive, who are themselves, fully, fierce, unapologetically. So if you're feeling that nudge, that longing, that whisper, it's time to stop waiting for the perfect moment. Time to trust that you are not too late, that you are not too old, that your best days are not behind you. They're waiting just on the other side of that first yes to yourself. Because the truth is, when a woman remembers who she is, everyone around her remembers too. That's the quiet revolution. That's the 5% woman. She doesn't demand the world to see her different. She sees herself differently. And that changes everything. In our 20s, we are taught to chase the dream job, the perfect partner, the impressive title, the apartment with the skyline view. Success, in those years, is a performance. It's something to be displayed, measured, and admired. We post it on our walls, on our resumes, on our social media feeds. We hunger for the validation of others to remind ourselves that we're winning. Because deep down we're still trying to convince ourselves but something begins to shift when we cross that invisible threshold. Around 40, give or take a few years, we start to feel it before we can name it. The promotion doesn't quiet the anxiety. The new house doesn't cure the loneliness. The relationship that once sparkled begins to dull under the weight of unmet expectations. It's not that we've failed, it's that the game we were playing no longer fits the life we want to live. That's when the 5% woman makes a radical choice. She stops chasing the script and starts writing her own. She redefines success, not as the applause of the world, but as the calm that comes when she's aligned with herself. She's no longer interested in climbing ladders built by someone else. Instead, she starts planting roots, deep and strong in the soil of who she truly is. This isn't just poetic, it's proven. There's a Harvard study that tracked people over 80 years, 8 decades, and the single most reliable predictor of a happy, fulfilling life wasn't how much money they made or whether they were recognized for their achievements. It was the quality of their close relationships. That's not their corner office, not their Instagram following, not even their health alone, but whether they felt deeply connected to the people around them. The 5% woman takes that to heart. She looks around and begins to ask different questions. Not how can I impress, but who makes me feel safe? Not what can I gain from this, but how can I grow from this? Her world becomes less about trophies and more about truth. And in that shift, she starts to live a life that's no longer about what looks good, but what feels right. It's a transformation that many resist because it demands honesty. To admit that what once excited you no longer does, that the life you built with such precision no longer fits, takes courage. It means facing the gap between what we show the world and what we whisper to ourselves late at night. The 5% woman chooses to bridge that gap, not with perfection, but with authenticity. She learns that peace of mind is more valuable than a paycheck with too many zeros, that a slow morning with someone she loves means more than a fast life with people who don't see her. That personal growth doesn't always look like achievement. It sometimes looks like letting go of roles, of expectations, of the pressure to be everything to everyone. And something miraculous happens. In choosing what feels right, she becomes magnetic, not because she's trying to impress, but because people are drawn to those who are fully alive. She starts to attract not attention, but alignment. Opportunities that resonate, friendships that nourish, love that doesn't require shrinking to. The irony is, when she stops chasing traditional success, she becomes truly successful, not in a way that can always be measured, but in a way that can be felt. Her days have more meaning. her nights more rest. She doesn't need to prove herself anymore, because she knows who she is, and that knowledge is priceless. This doesn't mean she abandons ambition. It means she redefines it. Ambition becomes less about competition and more about contribution, less about conquering and more about connecting. She still dreams, but her dreams have roots now. They're not about escaping her life, but expanding within it. And she knows this path isn't for everyone. That's why she's part of the 5%, because it's easier to keep running than to pause and ask if you're running in the right direction. It's safer to stick with what's known than to step into what's true. But the 5% woman chooses the harder, deeper way, not because it's trendy, but because it's real. In doing so, she becomes a lighthouse, not loud but steady, not flashy, but fierce in her authenticity. And others, still caught in the race, begin to notice. They start to wonder if maybe there's another way. Maybe success isn't about what you achieve before 40, but what you awaken to after it. Because when you change your definition of success, you don't just change your goal, you change your life's direction. You go from chasing to choosing, from performing to living, from existing to becoming. And that's where freedom lives. That's where fulfillment begins. So here's the invitation. Stop asking, what do they want from me? And start asking, what does my soul want for me? That's not selfish. That's sacred. That's the kind of question that changes everything. And once you ask it, you can't go back, because you've tasted something real, and that taste is enough to set you on fire. Not the fire of burnout, but the fire of purpose, the fire of knowing that your life, as it is unfolding now, is not a performance. It's a legacy in the making. If there's one word women are conditioned to internalize from a young age, it's sorry. Sorry for taking up space. Sorry for having an opinion. Sorry for asking for help. Sorry for not being everything to everyone. And most of all, sorry for saying no. This kind of quiet, constant apology becomes a background hum in the lives of so many women. It's invisible, but it's deafening. It infiltrates every decision, every relationship, every opportunity. And it doesn't come from weakness, it comes from strength misdirected. It comes from hearts that want to give, to serve, to show up. But over time, that giving without limits becomes draining. And that's where the story begins to change. You see, the women who break free from this pattern, the ones who rise, not just in the eyes of others, but in their own reflection, are the ones who learn how to set boundaries without guilt. They come to a radical realization they do not owe the world their exhaustion. Take Rachel, she's a mother of 3. Like many women trying to juggle a million roles with half the time. For years she said yes to everything. The PTA, extra hours at work, friends who seemed to only remember her number when their world fell apart. She gave her energy freely, believing that this was love, this was loyalty, this was what good women do. But what Rachel didn't realize was that while she was busy saying yes to everyone else, she was constantly saying no to herself. No to rest, no to joy, no to growth. Then one day, something shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet, deep knowing that something had to change. She began setting boundaries. At first it felt like rebellion, like betrayal. She had to confront that uncomfortable guilt that creeps in when you decide to protect your peace instead of someone else's comfort. But the more she said no with grace, with honesty, with firmness, the more she began to rediscover herself. She wasn't losing people, she was clearing the noise. And what she found underneath was powerful clarity, confidence, calm. This is the transformative truth that so few talk about. Boundaries are not barriers. They're not about pushing people away or living in isolation. Boundaries are bridges to the life you were always meant to live. They create space for authenticity, for purpose, for freedom. They teach the people around us how to love us better, how to respect our time, our energy, our worth. They turn relationships from transactional to transformation. Because when we stop overextending ourselves, we make room for the relationships that really matter. The ones built on mutual respect, not silent resentment. But here's the part that cuts deep. We've been taught that setting a boundary is selfish, that it makes us cold, difficult, dramatic, that if we don't pick up every call, show up to every event, or say yes to every favor, we are somehow failing in our role. And to that I say this: the only role you were ever meant to play was yourself, not a mirror of someone else's expectations, not a puppet pulled by guilt string. Yourself fully, unapologetically, courageously, because let's be honest, guilt is a liar. It whispers that saying no means you're letting someone down. But here's the truth. It's not your job to carry the emotional weight of everyone's disappointment. It's your job to protect the light inside you. And that light grows when you stop dimming it for the sake of others' comfort. There's something incredibly powerful about a woman who knows her worth. Not just in theory but in practice. A woman who doesn't need to explain her no. A woman who trusts her gut more than she fears rejection. A woman who realizes that every time she says no to what drains her, she's actually saying yes to something far more sacred: herself, her dreams, her sanity. We live in a culture that glorifies the hustle, the overachieving, the never-stop grinding mindset. But the 5% woman, the one who dares to stand apart, she knows that burnout is not a badge of honor, it's a warning sign, and she listens to it. She redefines strength, not as how much she can carry, but how wisely she chooses what to carry. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It takes courage, it takes practice, it takes unlearning years, sometimes decades of conditioning. But every time a woman chooses peace over people-pleasing, she chips away at the system that told her she had to earn her worth. Every time she says, "I can't do that," or "I need time for myself," she teaches the next generation that boundaries aren't selfish. And the impact of that is immeasurable. Because when a woman reclaims her energy, she doesn't just change her own life, she changes every room she walks into. Her presence is fuller, her love is deeper, her clarity is sharper. She becomes a lighthouse, not a life. She doesn't drown to save others, she lights the way so they can swim too. Rachel didn't just gain time when she started saying no, she gained identity. She lost a few friends, sure, but what she really lost was the weight of pretending, of performing, of pleasing. And what she gained in its place was joy, space, integrity, power. So let's remember this. Boundaries are not the end of connection. They are the beginning of real, healthy, honest connection. The kind that doesn't require you to shrink, or break, or burn out just to belong. The kind where your no is just as respected as your yes. The kind where love doesn't demand your depletion. To every woman out there who feels the pressure to be everything, to everyone, know this. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to protect your peace. Not because you're cold or selfish or difficult, but because you are wise, because you understand that in order to show up for the world, you first have to show up for yourself. You don't owe the world your exhaustion, you owe it your authenticity. And the first step toward that, saying no, so you can finally say yes to yourself. Aging is not a flaw. In fact, it's a privilege that many are denied. It's an opportunity, a gift that allows us to experience life in all of its complexity, depth, and richness. And yet so often we find ourselves fighting against the very thing that gives us this incredible opportunity, our bodies. We look in the mirror and see lines that didn't exist before. Maybe a few extra pounds, maybe the exhaustion that comes from living a full life. We don't see the beauty in it. We see decay, imperfection, failure. But what if we saw these signs not as something to be ashamed of, but as evidence of life well lived? What if we embraced them instead of fighting them? The idea that aging is something to be feared or fought against is deeply ingrained in our culture. We're bombarded daily with messages that beauty is youth, that worth is tied to a number on a scale or the smoothness of our skin. But this idea is not just false, it's damaging. It perpetuates a narrative that makes us believe we are not enough as we are, that we must keep up with an unattainable ideal, constantly chasing after something that will inevitably slip away. But here's the truth, aging is not something to be afraid of. In fact, aging is something to celebrate. It's a privilege. And the sooner we stop waging war against our bodies, the sooner we realize that the real battle lies in partnering with them, in working with them, in loving them for the incredible vessels they are. We are more than our appearance, more than the number on the scale, more than our wrinkles or our gray hair. We are the sum of our experiences, our struggles, our joys, and our resilience. Our bodies reflect that. They tell the story of a life lived fully. Science backs this up. A study in 2021 showed that women who practiced self-compassion and body acceptance experienced lower levels of stress and higher overall well-being, regardless of weight or appearance. The more we accept our bodies, the less we fight them, the more we begin to truly thrive. This isn't just about looking good, it's about feeling good. It's about realizing that we don't have to be perfect to be worthy. We don't have to conform to an ideal to be powerful, to be beautiful, to be enough. And yet so many women, especially as they age, feel as though they are not enough. They feel like they've fallen behind, like they've lost something essential. But I want you to consider something. What if the very thing you've been fighting against, your body, is the very thing you need to embrace in order to become the best version of yourself? Because here's the thing, your body has been with you through it all. It has carried you through your happiest moments and your darkest hours. It has been your partner, your ally, your constant companion. And the more you fight it, the more you miss out on the gift that it. Take Maya, for example. She's a 50-year-old yoga instructor who in her younger years struggled with disordered eating and body image issues. She spent years hating her body, trying to shrink it, fight it, change it. But as she aged, something shifted. She realized that her body wasn't her enemy, it was her partner. And today she teaches a class called Strong at Every Age, where she reminds women that their worth is not measured in dress sizes or the smoothness of their skin, but in their strength, their resilience, and their ability to show up for themselves and others. Maya is proof that aging isn't about losing your vitality, it's about embracing it. It's about finding strength in the very things you once saw as weaknesses. Now you might be thinking, that's easier said than done. How do I just stop fighting against my body when the world tells me that I should be doing everything I can to stay young and perfect? And I understand that. I really do. But think about this. What is more powerful, trying to fit into someone else's idea of beauty, or embracing your own? What if, instead of fighting your reflection, you looked at it with compassion? What if you saw each line, each mark, each change, as evidence of a life that has been lived, of battles fought and won, of experiences gained and wisdom earned? True beauty is not youth, it's authenticity, it's confidence, it's vitality, it's the ability to show up day after day and embrace who you are, not who you're told you should be. And when you do that, you begin to radiate a beauty that is undeniable. It's the kind of beauty that comes from within. It's the kind of beauty that doesn't fade with age. It deepens. There's a concept in yoga called radical acceptance. It's the idea that we must accept ourselves fully, as we are, before we can begin to change. It's not about giving up, but about letting go of the need to be perfect. It's about accepting our flaws, our mistakes, our bodies, and recognizing that they are all part of our story. And when we do this, when we truly accept ourselves, we unlock something incredible. The ability to live with greater peace, joy, and confidence. We live in a society that constantly tells us we're not enough, that we need to be thinner, younger, taller, or smoother. But the truth is, the only standard we need to measure ourselves by is the one we set for ourselves. When you stop fighting your body and start embracing it, you'll find that the things you once saw as flaws are actually the things that make you unique, powerful, and beautiful. You don't have to fight against your body. You don't have to fight against age. You don't have to try to fit into someone else's idea of beauty. You are beautiful as you are. And when you truly embrace that, you unlock a version of yourself that is more powerful, more confident, and more alive than ever before. So ask yourself, what would it look like to partner with your body instead of fighting it? What if, instead of seeing age as something to fear, you saw it as something to embrace? Because when you do, you will discover that true beauty doesn't come from trying to turn back the clock. It comes from fully embracing who you are, right now, in this moment. We've all heard it, perhaps even believed it at some point. It's too late. The world feeds us this lie, especially as we cross that threshold into our 40s. Society whispers that youth is the currency of success, and that if you haven't achieved it by now, you might as well give up. But here's the truth, the one that shatters the myth and opens up a new horizon of possibility. It's never too late. There are women among us, the 5% women, who see age as nothing more than a number. They are living proof that the world doesn't hand you a timeline for success. They show us that starting over isn't a sign of failure. It's a badge of wisdom, earned courage, and the relentless pursuit of purpose. Think about Vera Wang. She didn't design her first wedding dress until she was 4. Imagine if she had listened to the voices that said it was too late. Imagine if she had bowed out and decided that the dream was no longer hers to chase. Yet, she didn't. Instead, she launched into a new chapter, designing the wedding dresses that would capture hearts around the world. What if she had accepted the lie that it was too late? We would never have seen her passion woven into every thread of those iconic gowns. Then there's Julia Child. She didn't become the beloved television chef we know until she was 51. By society's standards, that's supposed to be the age where you start slowing down. You start winding up your career, preparing for retirement, and finding comfort in the status quo. But Julia didn't just step into the kitchen. She exploded into it, reshaping the culinary world and inspiring generations to come. At 51, she wasn't merely pursuing a career. She was living her purpose, a purpose that took decades to unfold, but one that was worth every step of the journey. And that's what the 5% woman understands. Age is not a limitation, it is a canvas. And with each new sunrise, you have the chance to create something that wasn't there the day before. Every day is an opportunity for reinvention. The truth is, it's never too late to start it. And sometimes, it's the courage to start over, to begin anew, that brings the most profound fulfillment. Whether you're thinking about starting a business, writing a book, or simply walking away from a toxic relationship that's been draining you for years, the key is not to be intimidated by the idea of starting over. The key is to trust that you still have breath in your lungs. And as long as you do, you have a purpose to fulfill. If you're breathing, you're not just here to exist. You're here to make an impact. The 5% woman doesn't wait for perfect circumstances to make her move. She understands that the most important thing isn't timing, it's courage. It's the willingness to take the first step, even when the world seems to whisper that it's too late. She doesn't wait for a sign, she creates it. She doesn't wait for the perfect moment. She doesn't wait for permission, she grants it to herself. The idea that starting over is failure is a lie. Starting over is growth. Starting over is wisdom. Because it means you've learned, you've lived, you've reflected, and now you're ready to move forward. Each new beginning is a step towards becoming the person you were always meant to be. You are not defined by what you've done or haven't done so far. You are defined by what you choose to do next. Look at those who have defied the odds. Look at those who have walked paths less traveled and still found incredible success. The stories of reinvention, of overcoming the fear of starting over, are all around us, but you have to be willing to take that leap, even when the ground beneath you seems uncertain. The fear you feel when you think about starting over is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that something amazing is about to unfold. If you've ever thought it was too late for you, I'm here to remind you, it's not. You are not finished. You are not past your prime. The future is still waiting for you. The dreams that once seemed too distant are still within your reach. You can still chase them. You can still become the person you've always imagined yourself to be. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest success of your life is waiting on the other side of fear. The fear of failure, the fear of judgment, and yes, the fear of starting over. But here's what I want you to understand, that fear is not something to run from. It's something to lean into, because on the other side of fear is the life you've been dreaming about. And that life doesn't care when you start. It only cares that you start. The 5% woman sees every new beginning as a chance to fulfill her purpose. She doesn't wait for the world's approval or the perfect circumstance. She knows that if she is still breathing, there is still work to be done. There is still a calling, still something left for her to give, to create, to change. So I ask you today, what if today is your second chance? What if this moment, right now, is the moment you decide that it's not too late? What if you gave yourself permission to start over, to try something new, to chase a dream that has been calling to you for years? You have purpose, you have wisdom, you have the courage to begin again. And if you still have breath in your lungs, then you have a chance to make it happen. The only question is, will you answer the call? The truth is, every woman can be part of the 5%, not because she's extraordinary, but because she chooses to do what most won't. Reclaim her voice, redefine her values, protect her peace, love her reflection, and bravely begin again. You don't become the 5% woman overnight. You become her the moment you decide to stop shrinking and start rising. So I ask you today, not who are you supposed to be, but who are you ready to become?